That's when my grandfather put a raised heel, pointed toe, and a scallop top on a pair of boots, and started calling them cowboy boots.
Rodeo time.
Welcome to the Luke Branquinho Show. This edition is really special for me, and I think you guys are all going to love it. If you love cowboy, you love rodeo, you love family history, heritage, and everything that goes on in the Western industry, you're going to love it. And we got our man,
How we doing?
CEO, Zach Lawless.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Zach Lawless, CEO and owner of Hyer Boots. Your guys' story is unbelievable. 3 years ago here, right here at the Las Vegas Convention Center, you guys had a booth set up with Hyer. But you didn't have boots yet.
We didn't. Do you remember stopping by that booth? We met.
Yes.
Cool.
And then you had it was an old truck I think you guys had parked in there, an old bed or something. It was absolutely awesome. But your story that you were telling my wife and I at that point, I was like, man, this is really cool, and I hope it takes off because I'm a sucker for things like that, family heritage, and bringing the West from what you guys started, your family started way back when. You brought it back.
Yes, sir. And I mean, it's kind of cool now because people are starting to learn the story a little bit more. But you know, the background of it, the first part, the invention of the cowboy boot, the fact that my great-great-grandfather has at least a claim or is accredited with inventing the cowboy boot, I think is the piece that gets people interested in the story for sure. So we started doing a mail order boots back in 1883 was the first mail order boot we did.
That was your great-great-grandfather.
Yes, sir. It was my great-great-grandfather.
C.H. Hyer, right?
Yep. His mug is somewhere around here. This guy right here.
Oh, man.
And then, you know, I think the next piece of it is really just kind of the journey that we've gone through as a family, not only to build that company into what it was, but also now to have rebuilt it. So, you know, we ran that business for almost 100 years, from 1875 to the mid-1970s before my family lost it, and got bought and sold around until eventually the Hyer Boots wasn't around, and we got that trademark back about 3 years ago now.
Right.
And it's been such a cool journey since then. And it really started here. It started, that first show when we had the truck was really the first time we even were like, you know what, let's go out and see if people even remember Hyer Boots. That was kind of one of the cool pieces of it. And so we showed up, and the coolest part that year when we didn't have boots, which was a weird way to show up at first, was the amount of people that came by and said, you know what, I remember Hyer Boots, or my grandfather used to ride in Hyer Boots, and it's been, from then on, it's just kind of been this place where it's like, man, people still remember it, and it's been really cool to rebuild it since.
Well, and you mentioned it in 1875 is in the story. You guys need to go check it out, and I'm going to have you kind of dive into it a little bit. But 1875, a cowboy walked into your great-great-grandfather's shop and said, I want a specific pair of boots, not even known as the cowboy boot yet.
So that was really during kind of like the long haul cattle days, right? So the railroad was ending in Kansas about that time. So the connection to the east was through Kansas City or the different stockyards in Kansas. So cowboys from all over the country were driving their cattle into the stockyards. And so my grandfather, who was in Olathe, Kansas, my great-great-grandfather, who was in Olathe, Kansas at the time, he was actually teaching shoe and last making at the School of the Deaf in Kansas City. He was a teacher of making shoes at that point in time. And he opened up a little shop on the side of the Santa Fe Trail to allow the students to actually make a little bit of extra income selling boots using the trades that he was teaching them. And that's where the story goes, that a cowboy rolled into the store on his way into the stockyards in Kansas City and said, I don't care what it costs, make me the best pair of boots you can for the job. And so that's when my grandfather put a raised heel, pointed toe, and a scallop top on a pair of boots, and started calling them cowboy boots. Yeah.
Really, the cowboy boot was born that day. I mean, there could be a lot of people question that, but that's a story that's been told and that a lot of people know.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like one of the important things to point out is that our claim is the first boot that's ever been called a cowboy boot, right? Obviously, there were cowboys before there was the cowboy boot, and they were all wearing different stuff. A lot of those guys back then, it was right after the Civil War, were wearing old cavalry boots and things of that nature. So there was cowboys wearing footwear before, but we were the first ones to ever call a boot a cowboy boot and market it. And so we got that marketing material all the way back to newspaper articles in 1875 talking about cowboy boots. So.
And you guys were the biggest cowboy boot company, I mean, from the late 1800s all the way through, I believe, 1920s, 1930s?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. A lot of times when I tell that story, I think a lot of people think of us as like a small cobbler off the Santa Fe Trail. But my great-great-grandfather, beyond even just having invented the cowboy boot, that was a cool enough claim, obviously. Right. But he was just an incredible businessman. So he was the first mail-order shoe in the United States. So he allowed you, this was back before there was like size 6s and size 7s, what's referred to as factory sizing. Yep. You actually had to go into your local like cobbler. They would measure your foot and make you a pair of boots. So everything was custom. Mm-hmm. So what he allowed you to do was trace your foot on a piece of paper and send it into the mail, and then he would start making you boots. And so that really invention, or the first one to do in the United States, allowed us to grow to be the largest footwear manufacturer in the United States, and from the 1890s all the way to the 1920s, 1930s, and have a really just cool part in Western history. Yeah. So like Teddy Roosevelt, he cowboyed in the Badlands in Hyer Boots. Mount Rushmore was dedicated by Calvin Coolidge in Hyer Boots. The legend goes that Billy the Kid died in Hyer Boots. Jesse James had Hyer Boots. There's some fun stories about Jesse James buying the boots, and all the way down to kind of more modern legends. Larry Mahan, we were his first sponsor. Loretta Lynn, we were the official boot for Loretta Lynn as well too. So had a really storied part in the history of the West. Just kind of, I think it's funny now when we tell this story, people just assume we were small, of inventing the cowboy boot. I think people assume we were this small cobbler and we just kind of disappeared. But it's really crazy kind of the part that we played in the West back then, and how it got forgotten, but it's really cool to be able to bring it back now.
And I'm curious, back then, the manpower it took to build those boots and the time it took, because, now we have machines that do a lot of the work for us, right? Yeah. But back then, you didn't have those type of machines. So it was handcrafted. I mean, somebody's hand touched every part of that boot.
Every part of that boot. It was also just there was less people in the world wearing boots, but yeah, it's kind of funny because by today's standards, you go to a lot of these factories and you can see people producing thousands of boots a day, a week, or whatever it is, and we had that claim of the largest boot maker in the United States from the 1890s all the way to the 1920s, and we were doing anywhere from 500 to 1,000 boots. But the manpower that took is crazy. We have these pictures of Hyer Boots on the wall of the old factory, and there's just hundreds of people working there to be able to make that kind of an output of a boot.
And that was in the late 1800s.
Yeah, and this is in the middle of the West of that period of time, right? So getting labor was difficult.
Yeah.
We used to have to go find German and Irish immigrants that were coming off the boat and bringing them into Kansas, and we were the first real business in that town of Olathe, and we were the first. That town was the first to get a postal office in it, or postal stop, because we were the big enough business that we actually got one. So just like when the West was developing, which is very cool.
Well, and it's crazy with the manpower. It's not like they get in their car and drive to work. I mean, I'm sure they were living out of town a ways. It would take them time to get into work. I mean, it was a process just to get there.
I can't even imagine. By modern day standards, there's obviously a lot of different things you have to think about when building a business. But I always think back to it, and I'm like, him starting and building what he did all the way back then. I think the mail order catalog is probably like one of the best examples. So when I say that, people are like, oh, cool, he printed a mail order catalog. There wasn't a printing press. Right. He was the first printing press in the state of Kansas in order to make that. So we had to go all the way to the East Coast and get one. And
it sounds like he was ahead of his time. I mean, really just a forward thinker, knowing what it would take to make his business a success. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it kind of grew that business into being very storied, not only with kind of those presidents and outlaws that everybody remembers of the West, but also into kind of the rodeo athletes, the silver screen back then. This was also kind of during the heydays of the Western. So a lot of those old Western films were Hyer Boots as well. Marilyn Monroe had Hyer Boots. So, he built a great business and great marketing for a time period when that was difficult to do.
Well, and that all the way through the 1920s, 30s, and it's not like those times were easy either. You know what I mean? With the Depression and everything that went on, I mean, and it was still successful going through all that.
Yeah, the business adapted a whole bunch as well, too. Kind of one of the fun things we've uncovered is through World War I, we were the largest supplier of cavalry boots during that period of time as well, too. So you kind of adapt.
Right.
We found some cool, old articles about how, they'd rationed the leathers during the World War I and World War II as well, too. So you could only have, one color leather boots. You couldn't have multiple color leather boots. But, yeah, there's, through the ups and downs, just like modern businesses today, you kind of adapt and you grow. And you saw that at least in those early stages when my great-great-grandfather was running the business, we did that really well. I think that what you see is kind of that as that grew on into the later generations and later stages, it became more and more difficult. And that's how, essentially, and in other ways, but that's how we ended up losing the business in the 1970s as well, too.
Well, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna go to break right now, but when we come back, we're gonna talk about the business getting lost and you guys bringing it back. Cool. Stay tuned. We got more with Zach Lawless. Hyer Boots. Join us on the Luke Branquinho Show when we come back. Well, here on the Luke Branquinho Show, we do a little rodeo trivia. I'll ask a couple questions. I'm gonna pause. You guys try to answer. If you get it right, maybe I'll give you a prize. Who knows? It's a fun thing about the Luke Branquinho Show. A lot of surprises. What city hosts the National Finals? Since 1985, this event has been held there. Welcome back to the Luke Branquinho Show. I have Zach Lawless, CEO and owner of Hyer Boots. Zach, again, I appreciate you joining us. First segment was awesome, kind of getting to hear the story of your great-great-grandfather, how he started the company all the way through the 1920s, 30s. So take us through from that point to 1971, I believe you said, is when hard times hit, family lost the company. What was it like up to that point?
Yeah, so, it's been a lot of piecing it together to kind of figure out exactly what happened. And, from my understanding, it was kind of a lot of the perfect mix of things, the perfect storm to kind of come together. But we had a factory fire in the late 60s that kind of put the business a little bit on ice as well, too. Changed over from one generation to the next generation within the family as well, too, which can always be a difficult transition. And then by 1971, we actually lost the business my family lost the business. The bank took over and kind of took not only the business, but kind of everything else that went along with it as well, too.
Now, when you reading the story, and again, I encourage you all to go to the Hyer Boots story because it is absolutely amazing from the start to where you're at now. But reading that story, you didn't really know much about your family in the boot company, in the boot business.
No, sir.
Right, until your grandfather passed away?
So my grandfather was the last CEO. So he was the one who lost the business. And obviously, as a prideful man, it's not something you want to talk about too often. And so I always say that it kind of got lost not only into Western history, but it got lost in our family's history as well, too. So we didn't talk about it very much. I joke that my grandmother laid hints. She'd say stuff at Christmas, be like, "Hey, we invented the cowboy boot," and everybody would laugh and be like, "Yeah, sure, Grandma and Dad invented the internet." No one took it too serious. But about 5 years ago now, my grandfather passed away, and we were going through the basement. We were moving my grandmother into a retirement home and just looking through the basement, and I found 2 boxes of all the old memorabilia that they kept from the factory. And in fact, the first picture was actually a picture of Calvin Coolidge dedicating Mount Rushmore and a pair of Hyer Boots, along with his order form and a thank you note that was written to my great-grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, really, all I knew was there's an order form with my grandmother's maiden name on it, a president that sent a letter to my great-grandfather. And so I thought this was really cool, and I went upstairs and asked my grandmother about it, and she lit up. She acted as if she'd been waiting 50 years for somebody to ask her about Hyer Boots. And so, I say that we stayed up late into the night. She was 91 at the time, so we stayed up till like 9 o'clock. But it was late into the night for her, and she told me all the old stories of Billy the Kid and Jesse James coming through town and a bunch of fun stuff. And I left thinking, man, I don't know if I believe anything that Grandma just said. But when I went home, I started just Googling things around. I think one of the first things I found, she told me that she had packed Marilyn Monroe's boots up for her. And so one of the first things I found was Marilyn Monroe's boots having sold at auction. I was like, well, Grandma wasn't lying about that one.
Right.
And so as I started diving deeper and deeper, it kind of got crazier and crazier. The story actually was bigger than I had really ever imagined it. And so that was kind of, I remember going and talking to my wife, and I was like, what would be really cool is if we could get this trademark, this brand back into the family as a gift for my grandmother. She was obviously going through a hard time, having just lost her husband, and I thought that would be a really cool thing that we could do. It was right before Thanksgiving, and so I made it my goal that by Christmas we were going to get it back and give it as a gift for her.
Well, it sounded like it took a while to get it back. I mean, 18 months is what I'm reading of calling every day?
Yeah, so Christmas was definitely a little bit of wishful thinking. We went back. We actually tracked the ownership of that down. It was owned by Berkshire Hathaway,
Which is kind of an odd.
not what I thought.
Right.
I didn't really know who I expected to own it, but that was definitely not the one. And I saw that it hadn't been used in a long time, so I started calling on that. But as it is, it's a big entity. It takes a lot of time to be able to get a hold of someone. So what my wife and I did is we actually dedicated an hour every Wednesday of our day.
Wow.
And we would just call as many people as we could. Eventually we got a hold of the right people, and then we just had to start trying to convince people. So, it's
Right.
and the convincing is more about bugging until they want to get rid of you. And so we would just call and kind of pester as many people as we could. And after 18 months, we got the opportunity to relaunch Hyer Boots, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Well, I mean, just the dedication you put into it to get it back is impressive. But then the work you've put in to relaunching and everything you've done, I mean, now you're the title sponsor of the National High School Rodeo Association.
Yes,
and we talked about it earlier. You start at the youth and keep them in your product. They're going to be loyal all the way through their careers.
100%, and I think the best part about that high school rodeo sponsorship that we do is really that it's one of those ones where the more that you can kind of give back and put into it, the more that you get out of it, right?
For sure.
Youth athletics were such a big part of my life growing up, and so to see these kids, and I mean, really, they are just the greatest version of the youth that you could hope for. Every one of them, so yes, ma'am, yes, sir. They're great kids, and to be able to go there and be able to support them and be able to make that kind of a pillar of our business and what we do has been such a cool part of what we've been doing so far.
And we touched on it in the first segment, but you guys here at the Thomason or here at the trade show 3 years ago, pickup truck, no boots. We're a boot company with no boots.
Yeah.
People thought you were kind of crazy, like, hey, what's this marketing strategy they're going at? How can you be a boot company with no boots? But what you guys have done is really impressive now that where you're at.
Yeah, we joke about it. I was joking about it with you a little bit earlier that, when you're trying to start something, it never goes as easy as you want, right? Anyone who's kind of tried to get anything off the ground, it's ups and downs, delays and hiccups, and so it's funny because we kind of came out with this great plan on a piece of paper. We're going to sponsor XYZ, we're going to be here, we're going to do these things, and life happens, and we hit some delays, and we ended up showing up to a bunch of the sponsorships we did with trucks instead of boots, and different things, and at the time, I felt like it was a big miss because we weren't able to sell our product. But the funny part is now I've talked to so many people that are like, man, that first year where you guys were just out there without boots, it was so mysterious. I was Googling you guys trying to find out what was going on. And so it's kind of cool how, things that you think might have been a problem or whatnot really pay off in the end of the day. As long as you just keep pushing, keep going, things kind of tend to work out. It's persistence that pays off.
Persistence, for sure. And, being in this industry as long as I had, people come up to me, what's this Hyer Boots? And that was after I met you and heard the story, and I started Googling myself because I'm kind of a history guy that wants to know what, how things got to where they're at now. And people question me, well, what is Hyer Boots? I'm like, just have to wait and see. I mean, they got a pretty cool backstory, and if they can keep building that backstory like you have done and where you're at now, I mean, people in this industry, I'm sorry, you guys question a lot of things that you don't understand. Let's be honest. But I think what you guys did really helped open the eyes to the people that enjoy this industry so much that you could come from something, lose it, come back, and roll with it.
And I think that's kind of been one of the really interesting pieces of this. When I first started, I really thought that the history was going to be the part that resonated with everyone, Teddy Roosevelt, Billy the Kid, all of that. But what I've really found is that the comeback story, the persistence pieces had a lot more of kind of a meaningful impact early on. And I think that really talks to our consumer a ton. There's so many 4th, 5th generation ranchers, farmers, or just businessmen that are in this industry and support it. And there are so many independent businessmen men and women within this industry. And so I think that the persistence, the family piece, that's had a much bigger impact than I ever really imagined. And the whole kind of approach I've taken is that, the story, it's been great. People resonate with it. That's your ticket to play. It gets you in the door. You have to back it up with great products.
Right.
And I think that's been kind of that next piece is really building an incredible boot, targeted for the consumers that are actively using it for a purpose. And I might be biased, but I also feel like there's a lot of reviews out there. But I really do think that we make the most durable, comfortable boot on the market. We've set ourselves apart in how we support the industry, how we care about our consumers, how we interact with our consumers, and like I said, it's been such a cool experience. We showed up here with a boot and a truck, and nobody knew who we were 3 years ago. And this year, we're refilling the booth because so many people are coming by, and we're selling so much product. And it's the part, people come in and saying the story's cool. I love that, but I love it when people come back and they're like, I got my foot in one of these boots. It is the most comfortable boot I've ever put on. I wore it around for a year. It's the best boot. I need another one. And they just keep coming back, and it's because the story got us in the door, but it's the product that's going to keep us here. It's the product that's going to set us apart, and it's been really great to see that all the hard work, the efforts, the delays that we hit have really paid off into a great product, something that's resonating really well.
We touched on so many things, but now I want to talk about the product itself.
Yes, sir.
Something you guys say is quality meets comfort and old meets new, and that is Hyer Boots.
Yeah, and I think that the old meets new is not only in the product, but it's all the way through everything we do. So not only in the messaging and everything we have online, when you first touch that product, the first thing you're probably going to touch is the box. And what we did is we went and recreated, it's a direct replica of one of the old Hyer Boots boxes. So you get that kind of vintagey feel. It's kind of got that craft paper on the outside. But when you open that up, it's got this gloss finish on it. It's got a contemporary font. And what we really want you to feel is that kind of feeling of old meets new. I say that, like, with Hyer Boots, I want you to feel something. I want you to feel like a nostalgia feeling. And so that box kind of gives you that.
Let's try these on. I know they're going to fit just fine and be comfy.
We have all the old newspaper clippings. It's the tissue paper. And then when you get to the boot itself, the first thing you're going to see is these really beautiful, ornate stitch patterns. And so every one of the stitch patterns that comes on those boots is actually from those archives, those catalogs that we started in 1883. We had almost 100 years of catalogs to look through and find old stitch patterns. So when you see the boots, one of the first things I think people are struck by is how beautiful the stitch patterns are, and those all come from somewhere between the 1930s, or somewhere before the 1930s. They're all Hyer original stitch patterns. Some people might have even seen them because they've kind of lived on in different iterations throughout the market.
Right.
But so those stitch patterns, they're beautiful. They kind of give this vintagey feel to the boot, but then we put it on more modern toe shapes, more modern leathers to give it kind of that newer feeling, and again, create that feeling of old meets new. So we're really intentional in how we build everything. It's a good fit right there.
13D is perfect fit for this foot.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier too, is you had all the old lasts, and you guys digitized those, and that is really what will help you set up a perfect pair of boots.
Yeah, we've been so fortunate on that one because the last is probably the hardest part for boot makers to get right? That's the fit of the boot, it's the DNA. And for those of you that don't know what a last is, it's a form in which the boot is like made around. It gives it its shape, it gives it its fit. And, a lot of people spend years like tweaking them and getting them right. But for us, we were really fortunate. We went and found from either museums or uncles and cousins' basements, thousands of old lasts, about 3,000 old Hyer Boots last, scanned them into a 3D scanner, and then recreated them to have the DNA. So what we were left with was like a fit that had been tested for over 100 years, a precision fit. And I think that's a lot of what people feel when they talk about the boots being the most comfortable boots they've ever put on, is just a time-tested precision last. And then, again, that old meets new. We put a modern comfort package in there. I think we have the best comfort package, gel sole, PU insole with a leather topper on it. And again, it just kind of, you get a great fit with a great comfort package, and it just feels different than kind of other boots on the market.
Well, you guys have taken something from history and brought it to life again.
That looks sharp, man. I'm excited to give these a whirl around, and I know my feet are excited too.
Sweet, I love it.
Zach, this has been a history lesson that I have absolutely enjoyed, and like I said, I'm a big history guy. And you mentioned something earlier in the show. You took the DNA that you guys started with and developed what you have now. But in your opinion and everybody's opinion, that DNA is what really started the cowboy boot for every boot in the industry that we see now.
It definitely was kind of one of the leading inspirations for everything that we still see today. And so, this industry is really rich in tradition, really rich in history as well too. So it's kind of fun to be able to bring that back and tell this story. I love history. I love it as much maybe as you do. I don't know if you're really enjoying this as much, but no.
Oh, I am.
But no, so the history part of it, people have really resonated with it. What we've been able to bring back definitely is a piece of Western heritage.
Well, we've sure enjoyed having you on the show. I know the fans had as well. HyerBoots.com. Check it out. Go see the story.
HyerBoots.com, booth 215. All of our handles are at Hyer Boots, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But find us wherever either you shop or wherever you're following. And thank you guys so much.
Yeah, Zach, thank you for joining us. Guys, thank you for enjoying the Luke Branquinho show. I know having guys like Zach on here has made it fun. Appreciate you all. Check us out on the next episode.
He was competing, he wouldn't snowmobile as much because he didn't want to get hurt, especially before the NFR. So he's been excited for that, but we just need snow.
What city hosts the National Finals? Since 1985, this event has been held there. That would be Las Vegas, Nevada, the city that never sleeps, the city of lights, Viva Las Vegas, as in the words of Elvis Presley. That has been hosting the National Finals for many years and many more to come. Hey, you want to see more in-depth details on the Luke Branquinho Show? Make sure you like and subscribe.